Hello, I'm Mark from Trail Buddy. Today we're going to continue on our clone bike that we're going to try to make as close to a Honda as we can. Decals and all the parts and pieces and whatnot. So today we are going to go over the exhaust system, carburetor, why the carburetor that comes with these guys are really, really bad, awful. It's the first thing you should replace. And our handlebars. So we offer a taller, wider handlebar that's closer to the Trail 70 versus these short, skinny little things. So we're going to take those off. And if we have time, we're probably going to go into a high mount fender because there's nothing that makes this look more like a clone than this low mount fender. Now this does it's supposed to copy like the European look because it seems like we always get all we're the last people to get all the cool stuff. So I'm sure these clones and everything were all built for the European flavor, not us in the US. So we'll dig into that. We're going to pull our parts and we'll dig in. So in my hand here is the carburetor that came with this clone, which is an Ice Bear model we're working with here. So almost all the clones I've ever worked with over the years, and some are more choked down than others in terms of some of the emission standards or whatever it is they need to do to get in the country. So we've already replaced this carburetor on here because we just couldn't even get this thing to work. So chances are, if you're struggling with your clone and you cannot get the thing to run well or right or idle, or sometimes they'll surge, it is 100% the carburetor that's supplied with the motorcycle. So we have a selection of aftermarket ones on our website, depending on what you'd like to do in terms of size and how much gas you want to throw at it. So now you have to be a little careful because this engine can only take so much gas before you're just throwing too much at it and you're wasting fuel and you're running real rich. But the big thing that's wrong with these carburetors is they come with a sealed port here that would have been your air fuel mixture screw. So you have no opportunity here to change anything on the settings on how this carburetor reacts or works. So this one here has it on the other side, opposite of us. But also one thing to note on this is the choke lever here is on the side that the exhaust would be on. So it's really hard to pull this choke or do anything or monkey around with that, or let's say turn the choke off after the bike's warmed up without really burning your hand. So these carburetors are probably the first, if you're going to do anything to this bike, when you first get it, this is the one that you should do. Also, there's other options. Now this filter is okay. We just threw it on here because this bike's life is really just a test bed to see how things fit. Now you can do a foam filter 2-stage that we have on the website, and or you could go with this clone or K&N version here on the clone. Now you just got to remember, do not forget to oil these guys. These come dry, but you need to oil them. But this is a nice look too. This is a little safer if it's going to get wet or go through puddles or whatnot, but it's not necessarily a necessity. But we like to run either these or the foam ones. So we've already had to tackle that, so we're not going to, and swapping them over is relatively pretty easy. Take your cap off, take the cap off on the new carburetor, take your slide out, then repopulate everything, put it back together as you took it apart, and bolt it right on in. Now they already will have a 1 inlet, and they'll still utilize your on-off reserve switch. But again, it's surging, sputtering, lack of power. One of the first guys to change out. The second one on the overall performance of the engine, how it feels and how it rides on top end, is also the exhaust system. So on the other side, we'll get into that and we'll show you why this exhaust system is pretty restrictive and what we can do to open that up to make the engine breathe a little bit better and get a lot more power out of it. So on the other side of the motorcycle here, we've got the stock clone exhaust system that comes with the bike. Now, you may or may not like this guy because this is extremely quiet, but the flip side is it's really choking down the flow of the exhaust system. So if you put a little bit bigger carburetor on there, you've got a little bit bigger air filter. Air is coming in easier or more volume. You could be choking it down quite a bit with this, but if you really, really like a really, really quiet exhaust, this is not a bad option to go. But it really sacrifices performance heavily. So what we're going to switch out this guy to is our Thumper exhaust system, which is a lot more open. It's got a really cool growl. It gets rid of this canister here. We've got the dark silver patches that would go on here, and it replicates the original better than this one does here. So what we'll do is we're going to have to end up taking this luggage rack loose and or off a little bit so we can get this. It's over top of this exhaust mount here. And then there's a middle section here in a bracket that also retains and holds the exhaust. And then we've got the two stud caps here on the head. And it's a quite simple swap. And this is another one where if you're feeling like your clone is getting choked down, doesn't really feel like it's got the power that you think it should, this is also one that really quite wakes it up. So we will get these parts off and we'll start swapping over to our Thumper. So I pulled out the Thumper exhaust. I got it all unpackaged. I'm sure you don't want to watch me open bubble wrap. It's not exciting. But here's the Thumper exhaust. And hold it up here to see it. It's similar, but it's quite a bit different. As I'm looking at it now, close, it probably doesn't come up on camera, but the chrome on our piece here is quite a bit better than the chrome on this shield. Just as so firstly, I think we're going to take the luggage rack off. There's a bolt here and the two head studs, so we will start with the luggage rack. All right, we'll set this down somewhere where I won't trip over it. Okay, so we've got her loose here. We'll move downstream. So under here, there's this little bracket that they come with that really doesn't even fit very well. The inside one's not even tight. It's tight-ish. Yeah, that guy right there, that was just hanging there. All right, now we get the studs on the head. Now, depending if you've been using your bike quite a bit and this is rusty down here, I do recommend hitting it with like a penetrating oil. Maybe a couple days ahead of time and just letting it sit and soak. These studs can break off. Okay, so there is the clone exhaust system. Now from the end, it has a significantly smaller inside diameter for the pipe. And there's all this restrictive baffling inside here just to make it super quiet. And I'm sure this is probably some kind of catalyst material, maybe. I doubt it's worth that much money. Okay, so now we want to check. We have an exhaust donut in here, so if you haven't been running the bike often, or very much yet when you first get it, you can kind of check to make sure that it's not super crushed. Give it a good look. See if it's burnt out. So this one is pretty good. I would recommend maybe if you've been using it, because like I said, we haven't really been running this much at all because we use this to test parts and pieces just so we can tell people what fits on an ice bear. So I'm feel good about trying to reuse that one, but typically you're going to want to try to replace that if you're using that bike more than a few times, a couple heat and cool down cycles. So this part of the installation, I just like to try to get this started and loose. Because what ends up happening on here when you change different exhaust systems is this may look exactly like that other exhaust that we had, and or if you're buying these from another manufacturer, I don't know how many times I've run into where this looks exactly like it does in the photo, right? You can't necessarily measure it, but the dimensions can be a bit different. So typically with the exhaust we have set up here, it can be a little tight on some motors, getting it over the shock stud on the back. So we'll take a peek and see what this one looks like. So got that started. Yeah, this one is a bit different. Like I said, now this dimension here where this lines up will be different on an original Honda with a aftermarket engine and or let's call it a Sky Team bike. Or now we have an Ice Bear here where this stud is back a little bit further. So what we'll do is typically I'll grab this and just try to pull it tight and get it over that stud. If it's too far, which is very rare, sometimes I'll grind out and make this elongated hole just a little bit longer. But this one looks like we could probably pull it over. So I'm going to set this down for a second. And I'm going to check some of my parts and pieces, and then also probably get a dead blow hammer. Sometimes what I'll do too is I'll put this up over here, I'll pull it as tight as I can, and then if you hit right here with your dead blow, it's just enough to pop it over that stud. All right, so I got the exhaust on. I went ahead and put the luggage rack back on. One thing to note on the luggage rack is try to get everything started finger tight and then start socking stuff down tight, because if you just say we just did the right side, we just got this tight, and you try to walk around to the left side and then try to get your bolt started, it's not going to happen. And it's nice, I had my assistant come help me. We had to spread this apart just a little bit to get it over these little tines here. And we got her back on. Now, one good thing to get into discipline with is if you get all this stuff on, especially around exhaust because of the heat and cool down, so the expansion and contraction. So I would definitely come back around and check all these bolts after a couple good rides, because otherwise they tend to kind of work themselves loose, especially when you got like a stack up of stuff right here. So as that stuff kind of tightens, as everything rattles, it can get a little bit loose, but just double check that. And then the front exhaust studs are another one that are notorious for coming off. Because these guys, you're actually putting like a little bit of a spring. So there's a flat plate that spans this, and you want to get these guys tight and get some preload on here. They're actually kind of just slightly bending, not quite bending that bracket, but putting some spring load into it. And also as you tighten these guys, you got to kind of like come back and forth, and you want to make sure you're evenly putting pressure onto our exhaust header here. So the last guy on our list tonight is going to be installing these high handlebars. So now these guys are about 2 inches taller and in about 1 inch wider per side. So I'll try to hold this up so you can actually get a good visual here. So I've got the bottom of the handlebar, about exactly where the mount would be. So there you can kind of see the height difference. And if I put it in front, there you can kind of see roughly the width that you're going to get out of it. So these are really nice. They're better ergonomic feel as you're riding. I don't know what it is about well, they're smaller and together. So it just feels like I'm riding with a bike that's laid over a whole bunch of times, like the old mini trails where they're stuck together. So the first steps on this guy is we're probably going to want to take these rearview mirrors off just to keep them from getting scratched or damaged. And then we'll need to loosen under here our controller assemblies. There's 2 Phillips head screws under here. And then we've got our hydraulic disc brake setup. So this guy, we're going to have to probably pull the cable, maybe route it slightly different. And then we should be able to slide everything back on the bars. These guys will come with the holes for the little stays. There's a little boss that's inside these guys that keep it from turning. So these are made exactly for this. And lots of people use these for their resto mod builds or their full-on modification builds. And you can put anything on here that you would like, because these are a regular 7/8 handlebar. So we'll get some of these little wire tie guys loose, and we'll start the disassembly. The one thing I wanted to catch here on these rearview mirrors, at least on this Ice Bear model here, is it looks like the left side is a standard thread, right-hand thread. And the guy over here on the right side, that is an opposite. So when you go to take this off, righty is loosey and lefty is tighty, just so you don't strip this guy out thinking that you're going to take it off like a normal fastener. I thought I'd do a little note for that to help save anybody any headaches. So, looks like the Ice Bear and our standard components that we normally get from either one of our manufacturers are slightly different. So, if we look close here, I'll get a close-up of this, but the hole where the anti-rotation is for the controller is slightly bigger in diameter on the Ice Bear than our standard components are. So now these fit our controller assemblies, but the Ice Bear looks like they use a little socket head cap screw instead of a cast iron little boss that normally sits in there, which would be the controllers that we have. So I will have to go measure this and drill it out to match. Well, same thing on this side with that diameter of that hole. I will go drill that out just like the other side. Yeah, the springs in here make it so if you're going to fold this down for transport, you don't have to like push and pull it around. Get it right out of that little paper lock and then you're good to go. Just a little snug. I think we'll loosen it up when we take the headlight bucket off. Do any changes there. Other than that, we got it. Check your throttle. Grips are on good. All the switches are working. Got it. So that's got us for tonight on the alterations we've done on our Ice Bear to get it close to looking to Honda again. We've got our tall bars on. Everything seemed to fit well. We did have to drill our little anti-turn holes there a little bit bigger. Just barely didn't fit. We've got our Thumper exhaust on. We talked about altering the carburetor and he's good to go. The only thing I've got to do here is I've got to take just a little, get a little more slack out of the headlight bucket with our left-hand controller here. So you don't want to like tug on that while it's all in there. It's actually pretty tight in there with all the wires. So this is the only thing we need to address after this. Otherwise everything fit really well. Throttle cable, throttle assembly, and it's a lot nicer ride. I mean, you're further apart, up taller. This is, like I said, this is modeled after, I think, measured, not that it really matters, but the 78 model is one of the bikes that I have, and that's what we measured and tried to copy with these handlebars in terms of like the swept back and height and stuff. So that's got it. I hope you enjoyed this video. You can find these parts and more parts on mytrailbuddy.com.